flames consume vast expanses of land. Smoke rises in columns that stain the blue sky, and the sound of fire consuming vegetation is almost deafening. This is a scenario unfolding in large parts of Brazil, where nature and its creatures face a growing and devastating threat. The country accounts for 28% of all fire hotspots globally, leading the rankings. The Amazon was the most affected region, concentrating 49% of the areas hit by fire. Following are the Cerrado, 30.5%. The Atlantic Forest, 13.2%, the Pantanal, 5.5%, and the Caatinga, 2%. In the midst of this chaos, wildlife desperately struggles for survival, while the fire redefines the map of their habitats. The air, heavy with ash, makes breathing a laborious task for animals, many of which are already trapped between the advancing flames and increasingly reduced areas of unaffected forest. With rising temperatures and dry vegetation, the fire spreads at an alarming rate, engulfing everything in its path and leaving little room for escape. This is a moment of crisis for biodiversity, where every spark can mean the difference between life and death. The Amazon, known as the lungs of the planet, faces in 2024 one of its most severe fire seasons. This year, a shocking 49% of fires are concentrated in this region, bringing devastating consequences not only for its immense biodiversity, but also affecting the global climate balance. The fire, fueled by a combination of dry weather and deforestation practices, sweeps through the forest on a daunting scale, consuming entire habitats in just a few days. In this highly diverse biome, millions of species, from tiny insects to large felines like the jaguar, face extreme challenges. The jaguar, in particular, sees its hunting territory drastically reduced and fragmented, complicating its hunting activities and reducing its chances of survival and reproduction. Small primates and birds, which depend on tree canopies for food and shelter, often find themselves displaced, without access to essential resources. As the fire advances, the situation of these animals becomes increasingly precarious. Species that depend on specific and delicately balanced environments to survive are pushed to the brink of extinction, with few escape options. The impact is felt in a cascade, affecting not only the resident species but the entire ecological network that includes predators, prey, and pollinators, which together sustain life in the forest. Beyond the immediate losses, the fires in the Amazon also result in severe carbon emissions, contributing to global warming and altering climate patterns far beyond its borders. This cycle of destruction not only perpetuates the conditions that favor more fires in the future, but also compromises the forest's ability to regenerate, an effect that could take decades to mitigate if it can be fully reversed at all. Transitioning to the Cerrado, known as the birthplace of Brazil's waters, the fires, which represent 30.5% of the total, expose the fragility of this crucial ecosystem. The vastness of the Cerrado encompasses a significant variety of habitats, from open fields to gallery forests, each supporting a rich diversity of life. This biome not only sustains numerous watersheds, but also plays a critical role in regulating water and carbon cycles, directly influencing regional and global climate. Among the impacted species, the maned wolf and the giant armadillo are particularly affected. The maned wolf, with its varied diet that includes fruits and small animals, faces a food shortage as the fire destroys both flora and fauna that sustain its diet. The impact is twofold, as it not only reduces its immediate food sources, but also compromises the long-term regeneration of plant species it depends on, such as the wolf apple, whose fruits are vital to its diet. On the other hand, the giant armadillo, which relies on the land to dig and build its extensive burrow systems, finds increasingly compacted and dehydrated soil due to the intense heat of the fires. These conditions not only make its digging activities difficult, but also reduce the availability of insects, its main food source. Additionally, the burrows of the giant armadillo, vital for its survival and reproduction, are susceptible to collapses due to the structural weakening of the soil affected by fire. The destruction of ground vegetation in the Cerrado has a cascading impact, affecting not only the species that call this biome home, but also the soil's ability to retain water, crucial for the regeneration of native vegetation and the maintenance of watersheds. With the loss of this vegetation, soil erosion accelerates, leading to further habitat degradation and a vicious cycle of environmental degradation that can have lasting effects on biodiversity and ecosystem services. This reality underscores the urgency of proactive approaches to fire management and Cerrado conservation, emphasizing the need for integrated policies that address both fire prevention and ecological restoration, ensuring the survival of this essential biome for Brazil and the world. Moving east to the Atlantic forest, one of the biomes most impacted by human activities, and now by fires representing 13.2% of the foci, the situation is alarming. This biome is a biodiversity corridor that stretches along Brazil's Atlantic coast, encompassing a rich variety of ecosystems that include dense forests, coastal, and mountainous areas. Each of these areas supports a complexity of life that is now threatened not only by urban and agricultural expansion, but also by the increasing frequencies and intensities of fires. Iconic species such as the golden lion tamarin, already facing critical risks of extinction due to habitat fragmentation, now find themselves surrounded by flames. This small primate, whose wild population is confined to isolated remnants of forest, depends entirely on the continuity of the forest to move and access vital resources. With the advance of fires, previously connected areas are segmented, further isolating populations and compromising the genetic variability necessary for the species' long-term health. Similarly, the collared sloth, another resident of the Atlantic forest, faces additional challenges. Its low metabolic rates and slow movements make it particularly vulnerable to rapid fires. These mammals, which rely on tree canopies for most of their activities, such as feeding and resting, often cannot escape the advance of the flames, resulting in tragic losses. Beyond the direct loss of fauna, the fires in the Atlantic forest cause the destruction of rich and varied flora, including many endemic species found nowhere else in the world. The degradation of this biome affects pollination and seed dispersal cycles, essential for the natural regeneration of forests. The disruption of these cycles can lead to significant changes in the species composition of the biome, with long-term consequences for biodiversity and ecosystem services, such as climate regulation and erosion protection. In the panel, known for its extraordinary biodiversity and status as the world's largest tropical wetland. The fires, representing 5.5% of the national total in 2020, exacerbate the existing vulnerability of this unique ecosystem. The burns in the first 6 months are already 8% greater compared to 2020, when one of the most devastating fires occurred. The flames, which spread rapidly during the dry season, devastate large areas of aquatic and terrestrial vegetation, essential for the survival of a variety of aquatic and terrestrial species. The giant otter, one of the most charismatic species of the Pantanal, faces growing challenges due to the loss of its habitat. These aquatic mammals, which depend on rivers and lakes to hunt and raise their young, find in an environment degraded by fire a drastic reduction in fish, their main food source. Additionally, the quality of the water deteriorates with the ash and debris from the burns, affecting the health of the remaining individuals and reducing the survival chances of future generations. The Pantanal caiman, another emblematic inhabitant, also suffers from the impact of the fires. These reptiles need wet areas not only for their survival, but also for thermal regulation and reproduction. With the advance of fire, nesting sites are destroyed and hunting areas reduced, which could lead to a significant decrease in the local population if the fires continue to occur frequently. Beyond these species, a myriad of waterfowl, fish, and smaller mammals face similar risks. Birds, for example, which rely on wet areas for feeding and nesting, find an increasingly hostile and inhospitable habitat. The loss of vegetation not only eliminates food sources, but also exposes these animals to predators and extreme weather conditions, amplifying the cycle of ecological destabilization. In the long term, the fires in the Pantanal threaten to drastically transform the landscape and biodiversity of this biome. The natural regeneration of wet areas is a slow process, and with the increasing frequency of fires, there is a risk of irreversible changes that could transform parts of the swamp into permanent dry areas, profoundly altering the ecology of the region. This scenario is not only disastrous for wildlife, but also for local communities that rely on these natural resources for subsistence. In the Caatinga, a uniquely Brazilian biome and notoriously resilient to the arid climate, the fires representing 2% of the national total bring additional challenges that exacerbate the already extreme conditions faced by local species. This biome, characterized by its thorny vegetation and rocky terrain, hosts a biodiversity that has adapted to the inhospitable environment over millennia. The arrowripe manakin, for example, is an endemic bird of the region that already faces significant risks due to habitat loss from uncontrolled resource extraction and deforestation. Fires add a layer of urgency to its conservation, as they threaten the small areas where it still finds crucial water and food resources for its survival during the breeding season. The puma, another resident of the Caatinga, finds itself in an equally concerning situation. Although it is a versatile animal, capable of adapting to various environments, the puma depends on an intact food chain and safe havens for hunting and raising its young. Fires not only destroy its vegetative cover, essential for hunting and protection, but also reduce the available prey population, forcing these large predators to move to more populated areas in search of food, where they often come into conflict with humans. Beyond these, many other smaller and less-known animals, such as lizards, snakes, and small mammals, face similar challenges. These species, often overlooked in conservation discussions, are vital for the ecological balance of the biome. Fires can cause high immediate mortality, as well as long-term impacts on soil and vegetation regeneration, essential for the maintenance of wildlife. The impact of fires in the Caatinga is also felt in local human communities, many of which depend on the natural resources of the biome for subsistence. The destruction caused by the fires compromises not only biodiversity, but also the quality of life of these populations, who find in the land their main source of food and income. As each region deals with the flames in its own way, the accumulated impact on fauna is profound and often irreversible. With each affected biome, not only biodiversity is lost, but the essential ecological balance necessary for the survival of all species, including humans, is destabilized. The need for urgent measures to protect these areas and their creatures has never been more evident, as Brazil and the world watch, often helplessly, the devastating advance of fire.